Okay. Good morning. Thank you for coming. Before I start today, I'd like to put out a mention to Cindy, a colleague of mine that goes for surgery right away this morning, and our thoughts are with her. This location has been filmed a bit lately because there's been a lot of talk about indecision around rail lines. I just want to talk about something that kind of bothers me about how City Council operates first. In the last couple of weeks, they talked about nuisance trees, and specifically Council asked for what the definition of a nuisance tree was. No definition was given, and yet the question was asked, but they didn't persist to make sure they got the answer. Last night, Mayor Clark asked specifically about the location for this new recycling depot for the green recycling. No answer was given, but he was given commendation by Councillor Gow for asking the question. I think someone should get a commendation or a pat on the back if they actually get the answer. Too many times questions are being asked and answers are not being given. And it is incumbent upon a council and a mayor to persist to get those answers. Otherwise, they're basing all their decisions on flawed material. So let's talk rail lines. Right now, Mayor Clark, his history is, first it was overpasses, now he thinks it needs to go outside the city. Don Atch thinks that the rail lines need to go outside the city and he can negotiate that because they're just going to like him. You know, Rob thinks that, you know, other ideas need to come forward. Well, you need to lead from the front, so that's what I'm going to do right now. There's been two options that have been heavily looked at for rail transport in the city for changing it. One is to go into a trench, which is tight because we have limited access. And the other one is over and underpasses, which is expensive, or moving them outside the city. So the trench ties in with the over and underpasses, but there's also overpasses probably that have to be created if they go around the city. You can imagine the city's kept expanding, so to go around the city is a major undertaking. And having worked around mining, especially BHP Billiton had a big problem with their trying to get their rail line in, that was huge. And that's nothing compared to what would have to be negotiated here, plus the decades it would take to even try it. So here's the third option that nobody wants to talk about and nobody considered. We go under the city. And before you laugh at me, remember that I've worked in mining for a lot of my life, and I've worked with some very senior people who I called on. So between the three of them that I called on in geology and mining expertise, about 110 years of experience, they're not saying that there's a guaranteed plan, but what they can tell me is that there's no real reason why it shouldn't have been looked at. The idea would be is we could predict where we depart from a rail line and where we intercept it on the other side under the city. So they can go underneath the city, create a straight path, and the rail lines can move the rail yards outside the city where they want to. They can get larger expanded operations set up for the future, because right now the rail lines, the rail yards weren't designed for the type of operations they're currently living with it, and they're constrained. So it could work both ways. The other thing about going under the city is that it doesn't impede traffic, because it would take a couple of years to put in overpasses, and that'd be 2 years of chaos for everybody. So all the problems we have now would just be exacerbated even further. So what can we do? Well, I think it needs to be at least looked at, and I hate the word saying another study, but this is something that has never been looked at. And in considering our whole province has a huge mining expertise, you would have thought this would have been the first question that would have been asked. Especially when there's lots of jurisdictions that have subway trains. Mining has used trains for 150 years underground. And so it can be done. It's just a matter that we need the right people to put the questions forward. My name is Cary Tarasoff. I want to be your mayor, and I want to use my technical expertise to start driving for real questions and real answers to get the answers that we need to make decisions. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
How is that any less expensive than building overpasses?
Overpasses don't move rail lines outside the city. So there's a problem with hazardous goods going through the city, Lac Mégantic, for example, lots of oil cars. So putting overpasses, underpasses still does not give a layer of protection for people to live in the city, for one. The noise of the trains is the second one. A lot of people are getting frustrated with so much noise around trains. And then the rail yards would stay where they're at because overpasses, underpasses would change that. They still have their same bridges through the city. All of that infrastructure would still be used. If we go underneath, we don't. It goes underneath. The other thing is, Charlie at 2016 was talking that it would be up to $1 billion to go around the city. Well, this is, from what I can hear, a lot cheaper option, and it'd be predictable. We would control it, where we don't have a lot of control, and we're dealing with so many landowners and such a variable distance that we have to travel. Right now, we could move the rail line straight outside of one of the main lines and then pick a point, just come off the rail line, create a portal, and go down under the city at a given slope, come back up in a pinpoint position, and tie right back in on the main line. So the rail line would be unseen in the city. You wouldn't hear it, you wouldn't see it. If there's a major issue, a spill or derailment, it wouldn't be within the city, it'd be under our feet by hundreds of feet.
Are you aware of any other instance where a municipality has tunneled under itself to relocate rail lines?
Well, every city that's got subways has done exactly that.
Well, the subway's different than CP's main line.
It is, but it's still a train line. But mining use trains still to this day, lots, to go underground. So they go through mountains. You go through the mountain passes. Those are big tunnels, and they're rock. We're lucky we don't have to bore through rock here. We have condensed overburden, probably clay. So it's actually an easier thing for us to do. We just need basically a tunnel boring machine, and they put in precast arches as they go, and they just keep driving it until they get to the other side.
But think about all the infrastructure that's underneath us that will have to move to make tunnels.
No. We're way below that. Nothing changes. You're talking what? A gas pipeline that's what, 15 feet below your feet? Nothing. It's going to go below the river. Nothing. It's going to come out over there and come out over here, and you won't even know it's under you. And if we have two rail lines that crisscross different positions, they're still going to go over top of each other. I know it sounds like a complicated thing, but actually it's not. And I've drawn a lot of underground mining. I can tell you that geometrically it's possible. It's a matter of people with a lot more experience than me taking a better look at it, and it hasn't been done. And we're about to look to committing for another 10 to 15 to 20 years to look at going outside the city. The rail lines aren't too interested in a lot of what has been going on. Nobody's getting them enticed with some other option, but I think this might help.
Do you have a rough estimate for how much this could cost?
No. I've been given numbers, but I'd rather not say it because honestly, it's less than the numbers that have been estimated to go outside the city. But until somebody that's qualified were to give out numbers, it would mean nothing just because I say it.
If the rail lines say moving the lines or building overpasses and underpasses don't work, what's the appeal to them to make this what seems like an even larger project?
Well, right now, part of the city would like to get the rail lines completely out of the city, including the rail yards, Montgomery and Sutherland. Get them out of the city, it causes a lot of commotion close in. No matter what you do around Sutherland and right up tight against Montgomery, we can't change that. We can't create enough overpasses that tight into a community. So if we gave the rail lines the option of setting up a new rail yard miles out of the city, or a mile out of the city, and they take over a big flat piece of land and set up their operations for the 21st century instead of where they were created in the old days, that could be a big incentive for them. The other thing is it's a guaranteed straight shot for them, so they can pick their starting point and their ending point where they need to hit. And so their existing rail lines will stay operational. Beside them, off on a safe distance, a portal will be created, which is the tunnel to go underground. And in a very gentle grade, it does. So well, trains can't go up and down grade. They do it all the time. In the mountains, they don't go from here to Vancouver without going up and down grade. Even in Saskatchewan, they traverse grade. It's just a matter of how much grade. Our trains are getting over 2 miles in this city. So originally, and I still adhere to that, is that we need to reduce the size of trains that travel our city now. Maybe more frequent trains, but smaller size, because these 2 mile long trains, when they get stalled out, they block off a major part of the city every time.
Have you had any indication that this is something CP is remotely interested
Nope,
in?
I haven't talked to anybody except for you guys on some experts that I've been waiting for weeks to get the information on.
And I guess I'm curious, I mean, early when you launched your campaign, you sort of spoke out against what you called the grand vision, big expensive projects. Now you're talking about looking at something that could very well cost billions of dollars.
No, actually, that's the thing. I don't believe it would, but here's the thing. I'm not saying to go spend another billion or 800 million or whatever. What I'm saying is the city has got to commit to one of two options right now because they haven't looked at the third. And they're 20 years now been looking at one of the two options, and they keep going through the same cycle, and they keep deferring it and deferring it. And the same people who say they're going to get a change keep giving another deferment to another decision.
So
What
we're
I'm saying-
talking hundreds of millions of dollars?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Easy. I would say $500 million to move them out would be a really middle of the road guess. But the thing is, it's a predictable number. And there may be an incentive for the rail lines to contribute to that because there is a benefit to them business-wise. For us to do an overpass on the rail line, there's no benefit to them. There's no requirement for them to even take part in stuff. There's no requirement for them to take part. Can you imagine trying to put a trench in here? It wouldn't work. There's not enough side clearance. You start undermining everything. We don't have, a trench would work if we had lots and lots of a buffer beside the rail line, but you can imagine undermining this much and look how close it is. It doesn't work.
You talk about your mining experience. BHP spent several $1 billion sinking 2 vertical shafts that are about 1 kilometer deep.
That's right.
Out at Jansen. You're talking about building a horizontal underground shaft that's many times longer than that, 10, 15, maybe 20 kilometers. I just don't see how that could be in any way cheaper than digging 2 holes.
Do you understand why BHP had to spend so much to sink the vertical shafts in the first place?
Why did they have to spend so much?
Because they froze all their pipes up and they thawed the ground and cracked the shaft, and they had to abandon it. So you need to understand all the mining implications of that before you understand what this was and the depth at which they were working on. And they were boring vertically. These tunnel boring machines are meant to go this way. And the problems that they had with plugging their pipes with clay that was freezing to their pipes doesn't exist when you go horizontal and you convey it out. It's a very different beast. Again, though, I'm not saying I'm the expert. What I'm saying is no one has looked at this. So you guys are reporters, go do your homework. People say they need to give a grand vision in a new way. Rob wants a new vision for things. Great, here's a new vision. Prove me wrong.
Now, as Alex was saying, this is a big project. You spoke against big projects like that when you entered the campaign. Like, why?
I am not saying to spend the money right now. In fact, I don't like rail lines the way things are going right now through town. Let's be clear. I would hold off on spending in this pandemic and I would stop things right now. I wouldn't be expending a whole bunch of money on anything because we could be in serious straits for the next year or two until we sort this out. What I'm saying is the vision for the long term is to get rail lines dealt with because this can't keep cutting the city off. So in the short term, I want shorter trains. That would be my thing, and that's a different issue. It's an administrative issue more than it is a logistics issue of building stuff. But down the road, we need a better plan. Because the plan of going underpasses and overpasses, we built a bridge we didn't need. Maybe we'd have had a couple of overpasses by now. We keep expending money in places that we don't benefit from, and then we don't look at the things that maybe we could. So what I suspect should happen is the proper people should look at these options and look at them in a more in-depth fashion. But I am not ready to write a check for anything. So let's be clear about that. But this is not a quick thing to be determined anyway. You're talking a major undertaking, and anything, even a brand new mine to do an underground development takes a year or 2 years probably. Sorry. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.